It has been almost 2.5 years since tragedy struck the set of the movie Rust when actor Alec Baldwin fatally shot cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. Well, tomorrow in Santa Fe, New Mexico, the film's armorer, Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, is finally set to stand trial on charges of involuntary manslaughter and evidence tampering. With more, we are joined by criminal defense attorney Alexandra Kazarian. Alexandra, we thank you for being with us tonight. Before I get into my first question, I want to make sure those at home understand the role of the armorer, and you can, of course, correct me if I'm wrong. The armorer's responsibility are the weapons on set. Therefore, it is her responsibility, in this case, Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, to make sure that when she hands a weapon to someone like Alec Baldwin, that it is safe and he is trained. With all of that said, how strong of a case does the prosecution, do you think, have against Gutierrez-Reed?
Well, if this was a case where there was a very experienced armorer on set and this happened, I think the prosecution would have a very strong case. But this is a 24-year-old woman at the time who had one movie under her belt. She came to the set the day before. She was not responsible for bringing the weapons to the set. She wasn't responsible for bringing all of the ammunition to the set. And actually, investigators said that there was a massive amount of weapons and ammunition when they did the investigation afterwards. So if this was somebody who was very well experienced and had a lot of responsibility in the past, I would say it was a strong case. But apparently she asked the day that she arrived on set for more safety protocols. That same day, the camera crew had walked off the set in protest of safety protocols that were breached before she even got there. So I don't think the prosecution has that strong of a case if they're going to rely on the fact that armorers are supposed to be the ones where, you know, the buck stops with them. They are supposed to be making sure everybody is safe. But in this situation, I think she has a great argument that it wasn't her fault.
Okay, so did you just then lay out the defense and their case?
Well, those are the weaknesses in the prosecution's case, but I think the defense also has the added benefit, I don't want to say benefit, but the added argument of saying that she's being used as a scapegoat. There are people who are much more had higher responsibilities on this case. They were producers, and they were told over and over again that they were lacking in terms of safety. So she has the added benefit of saying, look, I'm the youngest one here. They're all looking at me to pass the buck, and it's not my fault. It's a double whammy for the defense.
Well, you know, with all of that said, no one else is facing charges, if I'm not mistaken, other than, of course, Alec Baldwin, and his trial is coming up a little bit later this year. I'll ask you about that. So so do you think that the wrong person here is being charged?
Well, I think there was an associate producer, if I'm not mistaken, who's already pled out, who was charged and took a lesser charge and got probation. So, but I do think that she's being overcharged, perhaps. Maybe she shouldn't have taken the role because she didn't have the experience. And maybe they can argue that she should have known that she wasn't prepared for that kind of responsibility. But that's different than actively forsaking your role to the point that people are unsafe. I think there's a difference there.
Well, Baldwin, I mean, it's also to be noted that this has been really messy. I mean, both of them, Gutierrez-Reed and Baldwin, were charged, then they were uncharged. Those charges were dropped and then refiled again. And in fact, it was just last month in January that Baldwin was charged again. He is set to go on trial maybe as early as this summer for involuntary manslaughter. How does this case impact his upcoming trial?
It gives him a great preview of everything that the prosecution is going to argue. It's essentially the same trial, but with a different defendant. So they are able to see how the jury reacts to the evidence. They're able to see exactly what questions the prosecution is going to ask of their witnesses. They're going to have a transcript of what the answers were, and they can impeach the witnesses with their own questions. So he's going to have a great upper hand. Also, he's going to be able, if she is convicted, he can point at that conviction and say, look, they already have the person who is guilty here. They already have the person who is responsible. What am I doing here?
Do you foresee, less than 15 seconds, that Alec Baldwin will be found guilty?
It's very hard to tell. It has been a very messy prosecution because the set was so messy. I think there are a lot of things for the defense to argue. There are a lot of things for the prosecution to argue. It all comes down to how that jury feels about that defendant that's sitting in the chair.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you coming on tonight and sharing your perspective. Alexandra Kazarian, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.